Welcome everyone to this episode of Data Dialogues. I'm Julien Redmond from Ignition, which is the new name for Certus Insights. So hopefully you've seen that. If you haven't, go to the new website and take a look at the new branding and the new names. Today I have with me Mark Budzinski from Clean Data. G'day, Mark. How you going?
Hi.
So this conversation came about because I actually watched Mark's presentation from last year's Worldwide Data Vault conference and thought, what a great message for our audience to hear about how we communicate the value of Data Vault to business audiences and maybe where we're making a few missteps at the moment. So Mark, thanks for doing that presentation and thanks for taking some time to talk us through this. I think it'll be a good conversation.
Well, great, Julian. I hope so. What I can tell you is, reflecting back, this was last May in Vermont. I did that talk. It was certainly off the track of the typical set of remarks that went down that week.
Yeah,
So much detail, really good detail about what makes data vaults go, the nuance of how to go 10 degrees left or 10 degrees right to make your data vault better, some customer stories. So it's a great conference in that sense. But I was a little off the script, right? Because I, as a business person, tend to think entirely about outcomes as opposed to the sort of sausage machine that's behind the you know
yeah,
that's behind the success.
yeah,
And and I think the message that I tried to bring to the table last year, that we'll have an opportunity to reflect on here today, is the sort of disconnect between the data vault enthusiast, let's call it that,
yeah,
and those that probably get the most value from the data vault done well, and those are in fact the business people.
yeah,
So how I mean, one, we gotta kind of recognize that, we gotta kind of take that on the chin and say, okay, we're awfully good at talking our own stuff here.
yeah,
And but the opportunity, the real opportunity, is to take this conversation to another level in business terms with business people. And if you think about data vault as a good idea, let's kind of start there. I
yeah.
don't think anybody I don't think anybody that knows what they're doing with data vault argues with that, right? Would you argue with that?
No, not at all. I think the best data vault for me is one that the business doesn't even know about. Like it just takes care of the data, and they're dealing with the analytics. I was actually talking to a customer just yesterday, and they'd been asked by their manager, is this data vault thing still, was that the right decision for us? And the answer back was, data vault's the only thing that's working well right now. Everything else needs improvement, but it's an ecosystem of technologies and processes and everything, and so it's not a solution in itself unless you actually are giving the outcomes to the business. And I think that was the
Yeah.
crux of your conversation. I think that's what it's really hopefully interesting to this audience
Well, you
to
you
go
you
through it.
you're speaking my language, Julian. You're resonating with many of the things I'm passionate about. It's not uncommon. Let's say it this way. It's not uncommon for data vault enthusiasts to talk about why data vault is important. What I would consider from the inside out.
Yeah,
So a little bit about how the sausage is made. So we talk about separation of concerns. We talk about many to many. We talk about this ontology that we put together, and the idea that source data can change, and bring on another piece of source data. We're
yeah,
good with it, right?
yeah,
Everything's additive as opposed to change. So it's it's not minutia. That would be a little too harsh, but they're inside out concepts, right? And
yeah,
I started the talk last year by just reflecting on history and say, okay, when you have an idea, whether it's
yeah,
inside out or otherwise, what makes a good idea stick, right?
yeah,
And there were themes that I was able to find. So, for example, uh, ideas that we would consider today to be really off. Like, how did that idea ever stick?
yeah,
But it did stick because of the paradigm of the day, right? So there was something called daylight motion pictures, for example, where you would go to the movies, and the orchestra would be in front and the lights would be on. Well, why did they do that? Anybody that's trying to produce an immersive experience would tell you That's not the greatest idea to have lights on,
Yeah.
but they did because the patriarchal society that we had in 1905 said, "Ooh, this is pretty risky. Send the women and children into a dark space. We can't have that."
Yeah.
So, believe it or not, that idea was around for probably the better part of 20 years before we came to our senses. Um, just to frame one idea that looks dumb that actually sticks around for 20 years. Now, I don't think Data Vault is that. I don't think Data Vault's a dumb idea that's going to stick around for 20 years. But it's not necessarily how good the idea is from the inside out, right?
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
makes something stick. So flip it around. You think about today things that we take for granted, like the bicycle and the automobile, are just part of our society, right? Well,
Yeah.
it didn't start that way, right? There was a lot of dissing that these things are never going to make it. They're not practical. They're too expensive, and you had to kind of fight. You had to kind of fight through that, that negative energy to finally make something stick. So what I'm trying to say, Julian, is what's the difference between a daylight motion picture, which we would consider to be stupid, and an automobile, which we would consider to be, like, all right, let's go. It's all but ubiquitous now everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
At the time, both of those ideas looked very much the same, right? They were just ideas that culturally we were kind of trying on.
Absolutely. When I've got a bunch of your slides, so this was the one that really, like, one of the ones that really struck me. You in your talk you talked about this idea of hamburgers or cheeseburgers, and this was McDonald's, wasn't it?
Well, McDonald's changed everything.
Yeah.
The point is the idea of the hamburger was around for 30 years before McDonald's showed up.
Yeah.
And there was an argument about, are people really going to eat with their hands? Why would you want to put vegetables with the meat together? Yeah. Maybe we should be doing turkey burgers and pork burgers and nut burgers all instead. So it was an argument, kind of, sort of like, Data Vault. Should we do it this way or that way? Nobody thinks twice today about a cheeseburger, right? And it was the McDonald's thing that that basically changed it. That was in the 50s.
Yeah, absolutely. And so such a great idea that seems obvious now, but it had a lot of I guess you call them headwinds, and I know that this one everyone would relate to as well. The Sony Betamax. I think actually my family had a VHS player and a Beta player because my dad was a bit of a videophile at the time, and worked at a university that did some video production. But clearly VHS won, even though it wasn't necessarily the better idea.
Well, and this, talk about a parallel to Data Vault, right? So we look at this Sony as it's a better mousetrap. What's the problem, right? The quality of the picture was better. It was really a fabulous technology. The nuance was it was a 1 hour piece of tape. So 1 hour shows around the world, they come in kind of 30 minutes, 60 minutes. That kind of works, but it doesn't work so well for sports. So if you're trying to tape an American football game or something like that goes on for 3.5 hours, it's basically a non-starter. So VHS said, we don't really care that they have a better mousetrap. We're going to come out with something that's 4 hours long, and it didn't take, gosh, I don't remember the exact numbers, Julian, but it was less than 10 years. Sony went from 100% market share to like 6%. It was a massive change. So, to be sitting in the back room saying, well, we've got a better mousetrap, right? The Data Vault in and of itself, it's obvious to everybody. Look how much better this thing is. There's a lot more to it when it comes to actually a market take-up here. And there couldn't be a better example than this one.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Even though it might be a technically better solution, you still need to focus on what do the actual customers want. And our customers don't necessarily care. Well, obviously the architects and the data engineers care about what they're doing, but the business users, they just want their analytics. They want it faster. They want it at the business speed. They want it to be correct. So we know what the answers are from a back. It's like, oh yeah, well we have this thing and we have that thing. We can deal with change and we can load data out of sequence and all of these things, which are technical marvels. but your business users, all they're hearing, as I think one of your slides was like blah blah blah, or maybe bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. There's it's got to be relatable to what their actual outcome will be, and
So do you happen to have the slide that I had about Hadoop?
yeah, I do. I'll bring that up now. So we talked about
I do
Hadoop.
this. I mean, this poor Mike guy is a Forrester analyst. I'm just hitting him right between the eyes here. So sorry, Mike. I'm being a bit rude, but this is your quote, Mike. He basically said 100% market share for Hadoop. And you look at that and go, okay, well, how could he have said that, right? Hadoop now is in the rearview mirror as basically irrelevance too strong, but it's not relevant to a large degree, right? And you really think about Hadoop 10 years ago, it had all kinds of technical inside-out promises, right? It was a little bit like the Data Vault talking about separation of duties and many to many and all this stuff, right? So it never really hooked itself to to a need, and I think that's the opportunity for us collectively in the Data Vault enthusiast market, right? Now compare and contrast that to something like Tableau, right? So Tableau comes along. Admittedly, this is a vendor, not a technology, but these guys started Tableau back in the day when Cognos and MicroStrategy were market dominant, and was the experience that we had as users something that we would appreciate today? No, it was more like that Pong game. When you think about the history of video games, right? It was archaic.
Yeah.
And Tableau basically said, let's grab the guy that worked at Pixar, did the graphics for literally the Toy Story movie, and bring that kind of thinking to the table. And they did, right? They revolutionized the whole thing. And so that was the technical idea. The business idea was they created a credit card buying scheme. So you didn't have to go through the purchasing department for the corporate standard to go kick out MicroStrategy. That wasn't the idea. You wanted to just have people getting out their credit cards. So $200 here and $300 there. The literal strategy was called land and expand, and expand they did, because they turned the graphic Pixar kind of mentality and changed the user experience, overlapped with the business change, and off to the races. A little bit like Snowflake, right? Snowflake came out with a nice trap too, but it's the consumption model that they created in the business. So the lessons here, Julien, I think are good ideas aren't good enough. The good idea may or may not turn out to be a good idea, right? If you look at the movie theater with the lights on, but even if it is a good idea, even if it is a Sony Betamax, that's not necessarily good enough, right? So I tried to model, for lack of a better term, I tried to just build a little three-dimensional sort of thinking model that says, what is it about these ideas that stuck compared to the ones that didn't, right? So one, it's got to work. Two, it's got to matter. And three, it's got to sell. It's got to have all three of those components.
I completely agree. If you think about what Tableau did and now what Snowflake have done, they've created a completely different acquisition model or business model. So they do have very good technology, maybe better technology in some cases as well. But it's a different way for the business to actually access it and consume it, and then giving better results, like putting it in the hands of users and those sorts of things. And I think as you pointed out really well, there's some really good lessons for us to, where does that leave us with Data Vault? So that I think that framing up that there's been lots of good ideas that have maybe gone by the wayside, and there's been some other ideas that maybe weren't as good but packaged really well and focused on the actual outcome rather than the technical components of it. And that's what made them successful. And I think everyone in this audience knows the value of Data Vault as a process, that it actually does work. As that customer said to me yesterday, it's the bit that is working. We know that technically it works, but are we packaging up around it? the things that the business wants, like consistent delivery and and rapid delivery, and and a focus on the end outcome, and do they want analytics on their pipeline, or on their on their drivetrain, or on their on their supply chain, or on their employees? That's what they want. They want the analytics on on that stuff. They don't really care about, have we got every system in the warehouse yet? And but
Yeah.
I think often a lot of the technical people, have had this conversation many times. Yeah, oh yeah, phase one, we're just going to load all our sources into the vault. And it's like, well, that's it's not necessarily going to get you any results you can put in front of the business. So let's not do it that way. And I think, like, to Dan's credit and DVA's credit, there is in the guidelines the statements, don't do it that way. Do things in incremental pieces and deliver value to the business. But I think it gets overwhelmed by all the modeling components and technical components and architectures and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk us through this next bit, if you can.
Well, I think what you're saying is spot on. The prescription for success is kind of right in front of us, but that doesn't mean we take it up, right? We tend to go to our comfort zone as technical people, and just sort of rely on many of the concepts that kind of got us to where we are in our careers. And some of this get out of our chair and go talk to the business is it can be challenging for a lot of folks, right? But I think if you consider the realities of where we are today with Data Vault, there's a little bit of an uncomfortable sort of set of truths, if you will, what I call traps that seduce us, right? This idea that it's cool and clubby to be part of Data Vault. It feels good to go to training and get yourself certified and all that, right? You see that on LinkedIn, people post their certificates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so I'm not taking away from the sense of accomplishment when you do that. But on the other hand, we make it a little too tough for folks to get into the club, right? So how do we make the club easier to get into? And I think it's a matter of having the right discussion at the right level with the right people, right? So our value should be obvious. A lot of times it's not, right? But there's a translation that has to happen. We think we're over here. There's fire coming out of our fingers. We're cranking along at 100 miles an hour at the keyboard. The business is like, I don't know what they're doing over there, but they're not adding the sort of value to me that I need today. And it's not ambiguous. It's not hard, right? These people have real jobs with real use cases of data. And if the data is not there in a timely way, in a quality way, they've got to go find it some other way, right? They're not going to sit around and wait for you just because you think look at all these raw vault tables I'm building, so what?
Yeah. I mean, in my role, and I think very much in your role as well, in our day jobs, we're the ones that are trying to communicate to the business users. And while I feel like, my job is to translate the technical aspects of Vault or other parts of information management and analytics and stuff to a non-technical audience, to a business user, it's way out of their comfort zone. If you're a supply chain manager, or or HR manager or marketing manager or whatever it is, you haven't spent 20 years hanging out with data guys like we have, and you don't know the acronyms, you don't know, it is really, really unstable ground to get involved in. And so we've got to recognize that uncertainty. And I think that, to me, that's part of the clubby bit, is we have a language, and we need to make sure that we don't leave people behind, and we have that conversation. And so, when I'm hanging out with my team, I'm the least technical guy in the room. But when I'm hanging out with business users, trying to help them understand what they actually need to do for their business to help get this stuff sorted, I'm the most technical guy in that conversation. And I think, as a group, we could all recognize shifting gear and making it more accessible. Really talking about impacts rather than using our 3-letter acronyms.
Yeah, well, there's a corollary to that too. We think about agile development, continuous delivery, that kind of stuff, and by definition, there's an iterate model here, right? So let's see something, iterate. Let's see it again, iterate, and if you're the technical person that's trying to get out of their chair and go talk to the business, right, and you're worried about precision in some of these concepts, and you're not talking in not just in their language, but showing them something that we can iterate on, right?
Yeah.
So this I call it the clipboard effect, and there's a slide somewhere later. You don't have to
Yeah.
scramble to find it. The idea is pretty simple, right? So the business person, or excuse me, the technical person says, okay, I'm going to be all that today. I'm going to get out of my chair. I'm going to go talk to the business. I'm going to bring a sharp pencil and a clean sheet of paper, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say, right, what do you need?
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing? You're following into a waterfall trap. The business person may or may not be able to tell you what they need. What has
Yeah.
to happen here, Julian, is we got to build something. So the fact that, and when I say build something, build on the terms that that the customer is in. So this picture you're showing now is a very, very succinct way to, I think, reflect on
Love it.
what
Yeah.
job are we in. So are we plumbers, and we're concerned about code and earthquake tolerance and making sure the pipes don't leak? All very important stuff. But from those that are upstairs in the kitchen, they take all that for granted, right?
Yeah.
So my data, my way. Do we need to come a step further? Right now, again, if you look at this sort of picture and just kind of play with the metaphor a little bit, I'm not sure the data vault guys have to pick out the flowers and go buy the silverware. But should we be installing the dishwasher? Should we be installing the cabinets?
Yeah.
Probably, because if we're not doing it, you're leaving it to the business to do that. To just say, here's the plumbing studs, have fun.
Yeah.
You're putting a lot of trust that the business will be able to do it. One, number two, if they do it, are they going to do it to the standards that that we think are appropriate? I mean, how many times do you hear a technical data guy, or even just a data vault person in general? You won't believe what they're doing over there in the business, right? They're building dodgy stuff. It doesn't hold the test of governance. And well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. But look at this kitchen. That's the world they live in, right? They got to get that done.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think to me too, it's also about the conversation. We don't want to have like we need to say we can take care of the plumbing. We want to talk to them about what the kitchen's going to look like and how it's going to function for them when they're making a meal, not like placement of this next to that, and the way we're going to connect things and how stuff's going to flow through. That's important at the architect level and at the data engineering level. We absolutely have to do that the right way, and we need to make people comfortable that the way we do that is going to deliver consistent data upstream. But they don't. That's almost the end of that conversation. Is if it's going to come consistent, it's going to come clean, and it's going to be there when I need it. And now let's talk about how you're going to use it. I think that's far more important. And you have a couple of these next slides. It talks about some of the words we use, and I think this is on the same theme. Whether we're using language that the business can understand, or whether we're using language that which is in reality, this bit hit home because I find myself talking about hash keys and satellites and business vaults and all those things probably more often than I should, especially when I'm talking to business users.
Yeah, but if you go back a slide, I'm actually making a layered message here, which is we think when it's time to talk about the business, we talk about scalability, flexibility, the
Mm.
abilities, right?
Yep.
And again, I'm going to challenge all of us to reflect on some of this language, right? Is it a little too theoretical? Is it a little too motherhood, apple pie kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Where does the rubber meet the road? It's somewhere between these high level theoretical words and the detail on the next slide.
Yep.
What I fear is there's a language in between that's largely missing, and it's the language of the business person in their language, right? So if you're talking to a marketing person, they're talking about lead conversion and this sort of stuff. That's the language we have to get to. And you say, well, I'm a data jock. How am I supposed to know that? It's not as hard as you think, right? A lot of this
Mhm.
is just being empathetic, having their pain in your heart. Classic empathy concept.
Yeah.
Uh, go figure out the person that's trying to get the data for lead conversion improvement. What is it that they're trying to do and why? And you go, okay, let me bring a prototype to the table. It's based on Data Vault, but it's going to be it's going to be an Infomart layer. It's going to be a dimensional model that you'll be able to understand. I'm not going to just bring satellites to the table, and you
Yeah.
start having a conversation. You're meeting them. You're meeting them halfway, Julian. I think that's the theme that's hard for us to get our head around. Um,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
you know,
And I
just
love this. I loved your next slide about, because if you don't talk to them in their language,
yeah, well, yeah. That's,
this is what they hear.
sorry to be crude, but that's what they hear, right? They just hear
No,
bullshit.
I
It's
completely
true.
agree. Yeah, because if you don't understand what someone's telling you, you have no way to tell if it's accurate or truthful at all. Until you understand it, you have no way to make a value judgment on the statements. So I think it is a trap for us as practitioners, and it's not a trap that's exclusive to Data Vault. It's a trap for lots of technology, and especially in the information management space, whether they're looking at Data Vault or other approaches or other technologies. But I think it's a real challenge for us to make sure that we are doing it, and there are, as we get to shortly, there are some things we can do to clear some of that up for people. So. This was
Well,
really valuable. If you can talk to this one for a sec, I think this is
yeah.
helpful.
So this is the paying attention thing, right? So sometimes there's just open conflict, right? You feel it. The business people are saying, you data jock guys over there in the other building, you aren't delivering to our needs, and everybody starts getting defensive. You rally around the water cooler, you go off to your staff meeting, your boss gets on your side. Yeah, it's those business people. If they could only understand. Julian, I actually had a client once tell me that, and it's true, you can't make this up. The problem we're having in this company is we need to send the business people to Data Vault training. If they would only go to Data Vault training, meaning like the
Yeah.
the stuff that you do, like the
Yep.
how to make the sausage stuff, right?
Yep.
Like, oh yeah, I'm so sure this business person in marketing is going to go learn the nuts and bolts of Data Vault, right? It's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
so they go dark, they get evasive, and in the worst case they start building their own stuff. And the technologies are not that far different, right? You think about business people, they're using Tableau and Alteryx, yeah, but they're also dabbling in DBT, right? They're playing around with building data structures that they think they're going to need to do their job. So look, you see this kind of stuff, it's not necessarily somebody kicking your teeth in with overt conflict. They're elusive, they're building stuff themselves.
Yeah.
You can ignore that and whine at the water cooler, or you can do something about it. And I think to do something about it is, you got to confront these do-it-yourself projects, right? Why are you doing this do-it-yourself project? Probably has to do with speed. Probably has to do with getting the data just right in a way that you're not delivering just right. But most of the time, Julian, I think it's a misunderstanding, right? We the data jocks just aren't understanding what they need. Oh, that's all you need. I can do that, right? There's an aha moment that we go through. Having these do-it-yourself projects persist is death by a thousand cuts, obviously.
And it comes from lots of different directions. Like we had a customer who gave us quite a detailed set of requirements, which were developed for them. And when it was presented back to the business said, "Oh yeah, that's what we needed when we wrote those. We don't do half of that now." And there were some lessons in there in that the sizing of the scale of the piece of work was too large, and so therefore it took longer than it should to deliver, and therefore things had moved on, and so that comes back to some of your agile processes and making things bite size, and getting it through that sausage factory and so those sorts of things. But it would have, even regardless of that, if we were engaging closer with the business while it was happening, and prototyping these things, then we wouldn't have built a bunch of things that necessarily weren't going to be used, which is just a waste of money and time. Not just on building that, but on the fact that you have now not built things that they could have used because you spent time building stuff that they didn't. So, but I guess that's kind of the doom and gloom of if we get it wrong. If we don't have the right language and we don't talk to the business. But there's definitely an upside here as well, in that as you say here, it actually works. Like we all know it works. Everyone on this audience knows it works. It's just really, what are the things that we have to do?
Well, I think again, this this little triangle here goes back to what I tried to model out of history, right? Good ideas stick, and good ideas take off, and markets are developed. Things turn from random to ubiquity when it works, it matters, and it sells, right? So I think that it works part when it comes to Data Vault is let's not lose sight of the fact that we're trying to turn this data into actionable intelligence, right? That key little segue. We're not just building and implementing a methodology just because, right? We're not over here stirring our peas around our plate, feeling good about ourselves. We're actually trying to turn this into action, right? So. Let's make sure we're conscious of where business rules go. We're going to do that best when we're working with the business. Let's make sure we're using good software. So if you're trying to build a data vault by yourself, without a tool, that's probably just plain dumb. Use certified people or certified consultants like you guys, at all costs, right? So, doing it right, though there's plenty of examples where I think people do it wrong. Doing it right is not is probably not the hard part, right? Let's not deprioritize the information layer. That's just as important as the staging layer. Let's not get overly obsessed with the models. And when I say that, I mean let's not get obsessed with the models before we show something to the business. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay, and expect to be wrong. Right. So you build a certain model about how data from different sources comes together and you show it to the business. Now we're starting the conversation and we're going to discover what's missing, what's wrong, what's redundant, where we have a data quality problem. Oh, I thought that data was there in that system. It turns out it's not. Where are we going to get that data from? Right. Those realities that come from, let's just get started. But if you flip to the next slide, then it's not just a matter of it works. How do we make this? How do we make this stuff matter? And I think this is largely this translation that we're doing, for the business. So here's a very simple, crude model of an org chart, right? You got the technical Hans on the left, you got the data consumers on the right. We care about very different things, clearly, right? So we're here for the good of the team. The data consumers, they're the selfish ones, right? Just give me what I need when I need it to do my job. And the collective aggregation of those selfish people, well, that's your data consumers. The thread in the middle, though, this concept of senior management, who really is about building the infrastructure, making sure they invest in the appropriate human capital with the appropriate process and all that to grow the company and operate the company. They're the link in the middle. So these green arrows, Julian, to me are potentially magical here. Rather than talking about corporate governance to a data consumer, that's a non-starter. Let's talk about those concepts to senior management. Why? Because they care about risk mitigation, right? And then you let the senior management talk to the business about growing the business and operating the business. And when it's our turn to talk to the business, we hop over that fence. We speak to them in their language on their terms. That's not to say we don't care about corporate governance. I'm just saying have the right conversation with the right people. You don't have a conversation about corporate governance with the marketing influencer that's trying to figure out their lead conversion. You have that discussion with the CFO. But I think all parties, as long as that classic phrase, your audience, right? There is a conversation to be had about governance and scalability and all that. It's just not with the marketeer. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we could sum up this whole conversation with that simple phrase of have the right conversations with the right people, and maybe tack onto that with language that they understand, so you make yourself clear. But it's a simple idea, but it's something that I think as Data Vault practitioners, whether we're sitting, as a practitioner in an organization trying to convince that business that we want to go Data Vault, or as a service provider or a vendor of technology, now, when we're not being as effective as we could be in actually helping managers and consumers understand this, the value of it, and I think that leads, nicely into this kind of last part of your presentation.
Well, So the it sells is about relevance and enthusiasm, right? So can we take our enthusiasm away from that red heart we had way in the beginning, which is we're all fired up about the technical detail about Data Vault, and turn it into enthusiasm about outcomes and what difference it's making and the value that it brings. And again, not in hairy-fairy theoretical terms, but in tangible terms with the business, with the salespeople, the marketing people, the finance people, the those that are analyzing and taking action based on data, can we get them the data they need when they want it, while we're embracing with senior management the governance and the stuff that actually we're good for. We gotta I think at the end of the day, it's about will, Julian. It's a matter of getting out of our chairs and making a difference. It's just too easy to sit behind the screen and and just sort of pound the keys at the latest thing that we have to do, at the latest table we have to build. It's a lot harder to go talk to somebody that doesn't speak our language. But I'm telling you, and you see this in your business. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. This is where the magic happens. You want to make data vaults stickier in the market. You want to make them something approaching ubiquity. That's the metamorphosis we have to go through. It's about the outcomes and why does it matter?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think there's lots of answers here. Like, this is what clean data does, right? You guys actually go and talk to the senior people in businesses to try and actually help them understand why they should care about this thing that their technical people are telling them about. We've developed an exec overview, so it's a 1-day course rather than a 3-day certification course, so that execs can come on and get an understanding without getting all the techno babble that they're not going to grasp. They don't have the background in computer science or whatever.
Well, that's a great product service that you offer, right? We need more of that in the market, right? I think clean data is. We're probably unique at the parade of data vault enthusiasts here, because at the end of the day, it's just a means to an end. The end we care about is raising revenue, abating customer attrition, finding the appropriate upsell opportunities, all of that business related stuff. And to a large degree, the customers look at us and go, look, I don't care if it's squirrels in a cage or a data vault, do whatever you want. Just make the business outcome, happen for us. And so the fact that Data Vault is a pretty effective methodology and architecture to take the approach, particularly for larger, thriving organizations where you do have mergers and acquisitions and changing source data, these kind of real world things. But I think that's it. If you want to do an infomercial for us, it's clean data is about that business value and having that conversation. So the fact that you're doing that too, trying to translate this stuff and something like a 1-day course, superb, really, really, really well received, I'm sure.
Well, and I think we need all of it. We don't have enough consultants in this community of ours that are focused on the business and the business outcomes and on the executive engagement and the governance and risk management, because we are a group of technical boffins trying to solve technical problems. And so I think what you guys do is actually fantastic. The executive overview course is a tool. I think it's a tool that we obviously have produced with DVA's endorsement and help to offer as a short course, because that's definitely a gap we've identified. But I think that strategic engagement is something that more people should try and do, or obviously reach out and partner with you guys as we have, because I think that's a great way to lift that conversation. If you're not comfortable with having that conversation, bring in someone who is, to help you.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the answer here is that we all exist in an ecosystem. We all have different skill sets. We should rely on each other and work with each other to make these things possible, rather than you can't do everything yourself. So can't do everything. Clean data can't do everything. DVA can't do everything. We all need to work together to make this work. And you had some cool slides, I think, at the end of yours of we want Tableau, not Hadoop.
So if you go back to history, we'll just pick on the losers and celebrate the winners, right? We want to
exactly.
we have everything to be a cheeseburger here, right? We just need to turn the knob, much like McDonald's did for burgers, right? We just need to turn it. So hopefully we can. Look forward to it.
Yeah, excellent. Well, look, I really appreciate your time. To have this chat. It was obviously a bit of a free-form way to talk about it. If people want to go and actually see your presentation, then notice that in the latest podcast from DVA, Cindy actually gives away some access codes to get some limited access to the presentations from WWDVC from last year and previous years. So if you're watching this and you want to actually go and see Mark's actual talk, then that's the way to go and find it. Go watch Cindy's latest, the recap episode of the DVA podcast. And obviously stay tuned on DVIC for more of this sort of content. But Mark, thanks so much for coming along today.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Joe.